Tell the story of how you have come to love yourself because God loved you first. Don't be afraid to tell your church family what you need. Allies, tell the stories about how the work of God is moving in the lives of the LGBTQ plus people that you know and love. Tell your own story of growth, how you came to embrace all people, and maybe the struggles you felt along the way. And for those of you who aren't quite sure about all of this, please tell your story too. Share your story. Share the questions and the experiences that you've had. Share the struggles that stand in your way. And share how God is transforming you day by day in love. Finally, respond with awe. After Peter shares his story, the Jewish Christian community in Jerusalem is speechless. They respond with silence and eventually with praise. Sometimes this is the only faithful response. So be yourself and be open. Listen deeply. Move with God rather than standing in their way. Be ready for the unexpected. Tell your story. Respond with awe. This is not a linear process, nor is it that easy. But if we do all of these things faithfully, repeating as needed, we will arrive together in the heart of God. In this same spirit, let me tell you a story. It's my own. When people ask me that most popular question, when did you know that you were gay? I tell them that my first hint was when I was about 12. The truth is, my sexual orientation as a queer woman grew up right along with my spirituality and my faith in God. I was raised in the church, the daughter of a United Methodist pastor, and while I had heard stories and sung songs about the love of God from a very early age, it didn't become real to me until I was about 12. I like to think that it was hard for me to really feel the love of God until I began to understand and explore how I might most intimately love others. Over the next several years, my faith and my queerness grew, with one growing in community and one in the quiet of my own heart and my own soul. By the beginning of high school, I felt called to leadership in my local church, leading Bible studies and youth group. Shortly after graduating from high school, like Peter, I heard the voice of the Spirit, and she was calling me to ordained ministry. This is where things got messy for me. The denomination that I had grown up in, which I loved and longed to serve, has for 5 decades called queerness incompatible with Christian teaching. To this day, the United Methodist Church will not marry or ordain LGBTQ people like me. Despite this, I move forward, trusting in the Spirit's leading. I earned my Bible degree at Bluffton. I met my now wife, Beth. I came out, we got married, and I went to seminary. I fought and I organized for the rights of people like me in the United Methodist Church over the next 10 years. But over and over again, that church chose to make distinctions. That church chose to hinder the movement of the Spirit. And it became very clear that there was no room for me. My heart was broken by the loss of the one community, tradition, and place that really felt like home. I was traumatized by the violence that I witnessed and experienced firsthand in that church. Verbal, spiritual, emotional, and even physical violence. Even today, after years of processing and healing, it hurts. I think that it probably always will. But my friends, my story does not end there, as you can see by the fact that I'm here this morning. That same Holy Spirit that rocked Peter's world and blew open the doors of the early church, who had called me to ministry in the first place, she sought me out in my queer religious exile. She had been there all along. And she said to me, "Katie, stop waiting for the church's permission and start doing what I've called you to do." Woo! Like Peter, I was shocked and I was super uncomfortable, but the message was undeniable. That was 2 years ago. In the 2 years since, I have built the Belonging Table, a ministry where people who are like me, we call ourselves queers, mystics, and misfits, can receive spiritual care and receive the sacrament of belonging that they may not have received in their local church. Almost all the people that I work with have experienced religious trauma, many of them because they are LGBTQ+. Most of them are seeking a place to truly belong, but most of them also would never trust a church again. Many long to heal and rebuild their relationship with God or Spirit apart from the confines of religion. As I've held space for the healing of these people, the Spirit has also called me back to the church to support congregations like this one, doing the real work of affirmation and inclusion. It's like the late Desmond Tutu said, there comes a point where we need to ask why people are coming out of the river and go upstream and figure out why they're falling in the river in the first place. I like to think that my ministry today spans the whole river, not just offering folks care like me who have been hurt by the church, but also preventing harm and promoting health upstream in churches like First Mennonite. Speaking of that work upstream, let me tell you one final story. It's about a small town congregation that didn't expect to find themselves in the middle of one of the cultural divides of their lifetimes. For decades, LGBTQ families and LGBTQ people were in their midst. After a while, they developed a statement of welcome, and years later, a policy of full inclusion at every level of that church. Not everyone in the community was of one mind about gender and sexuality, but they were of one mind that God calls us to be kind and to be loving. They called their first LGBTQ pastor. If the Holy Spirit had given her the same gifts, who were they to hinder God? Their shared ministry made waves in their small village and in their denomination. It also planted seeds. Now, fast forward just a couple of years, and these seeds are in full bloom. Families feel supported as they publicly celebrate the milestones of their queer loved ones. The congregation is home to youth who feel safe enough to come out as queer and trans. Children feel safe enough to experiment with genders in the way that feel natural to them. These children and youth are supported every step of the way, and the adults in this church know that this is life-saving work. They understand, you see, that if a queer youth knows just one supportive adult, it reduces their risk of suicide by 40%. So they know this whole affirming faith community is priceless. It hasn't always been easy for them, though. Sometimes the rainbow signs attracted unloving attention. They worry about safety and bullying. They fear the backlash of anti-queer legislation in their state and in their country. Sometimes folks struggle with the concepts of gender and sexuality, and don't even get them started on all the terminology. But you know what? They put in the work to learn. They brave the hard conversations. They risk asking simple questions and really hard ones. They hurt one another sometimes, and they give and receive forgiveness. They try new things. They face their fears, and they choose to act in solidarity with LGBTQ+ people in their rural community, no matter the cost. They might not realize it, but they are giving their kids at a fighting chance of a faith journey without the trauma that I and so many others have known. They are building a church that these young people might actually want to call home. And they might not know this, but they have already saved lives. First Mennonite Church, the story that I have just told, is your story. It is up to you, and it is up to the Holy Spirit to write the next chapter. Promise me that you will keep going. But first, take just a little time to get quiet, to notice all that God